Summer scouting is in full effect, and I got a chance to take a look at a few of the tight ends from this class, so I thought I'd rank them 1 through 8 and give you my views, thoughts, and opinions on them. Now, these are subject to change as the season progresses. These are just my summer rankings on what I've gotten to see so far, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 8, I have Bryson Nesbit, the tight end from North Carolina. Now, Nesbit is a bit on the lighter side at 6'5", 230, and for a tight end, that is pretty light. And in 2022, he had 35 receptions for 4 touchdowns, 507 yards, and 14.5 yards per reception, which isn't great production, but it's not terrible either. Now, you're not going to want Nesbit to line up as like an inline tight end, which is going to be a trend for this year's tight end class from what I've seen so far. A lot of them are a little bit smaller, not your traditional tight ends, and Nesbit is one of those guys that's going to be like that big slot, similar to like a Dalton Kincaid of last year. He's a great athlete. He's got good speed, although I do think that his acceleration is a bit lackluster. I just think it takes him a little bit to get to 0 to 30, but that 30 to 60, he's like flying. He shows good effort when blocking and running his routes and when he's got the ball in his hands. And due to his size, his blocking isn't anything great at all. You don't want him blocking in line much or at all. And like I said, his size, he's really small. He's probably around the 10th percentile in weight, if not lower. So you want to see him get his weight up, but I do think he's going to have a really good season with Drake May as his quarterback. He's going to be a really good seam stretcher in the NFL, I think. But I think he's going to struggle if a team wants to put him as an inline tight end or like a traditional tight end. I think he needs to go to a team that's willing to use him as that big slot / just receiving weapon, more so than like a tight end or receiver. Alright, coming in at number 7, I have Jaheim Bell, the tight end / running back from Florida State. He just transferred to Florida State from South Carolina. He originally played in South Carolina with Spencer Rattler. He's 6'3", 232 pounds, which is below average in height, below average in weight. In 2022, he caught 25 receptions for 231 yards, 2 touchdowns, on a 9.2 yards per catch average. Now the kicker is he has 73 carries for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Jaheim Bell is more of your Swiss Army knife player. So I really didn't know which position group to rank him in. I chose tight end, but he's really a tight end / big slot receiver / running back. I don't really know what he's going to play in the NFL, which I'm going to get to is going to probably be a bad thing. But first, for his strengths, since he is kind of like a running back, his run after catch is pretty good. Once he gets the ball into his hands, he can make plays. He's a very fluid athlete. He's one of the better athletes for a tight end. He's got great long speed, but you're not going to want him, just like Bryson Nesbit, you're not going to want to play him as that inline tight end. His blocking is below average. And then as a con, I do have position question mark, because once he gets to the NFL, is he going to be a tight end? Probably not. Not your traditional tight end. He's too small for that. Is he going to be that big slot? Possibly. Is he going to be more of that running back? I mean, at 6'3", 232, that's a big running back. He's probably in the 95th percentile in height and weight. If he does play running back in the NFL, he'd be more of like that Latavius Murray build, which is interesting. But since I do have him as a tight end in this video, I'm going to talk about him as a tight end. And I just don't think he's technically sound as a tight end, just because he doesn't get as many reps as a tight end like these other guys do. So I hope that Florida State commits him to a position, whether that's tight end, receiver, or running back. Just commits him to a position so we can learn that position, and then once he transfers to the NFL, he's going to have more experience at that position, because right now he's bang average at 3 positions, at tight end, slot receiver, and running back. So I'd like to see him hone in on one of those positions and really thrive. Alright, at number 6, we got Cade Stover, the tight end from Ohio State. Now, he's a bit of a bigger tight end compared to Bryson Nesbit and Jaheim Bell. He's 6'3", 251 pounds, and in 2022, he had 36 receptions for 5 touchdowns and 406 yards, which isn't bad production by any means, but it's not great either. I think he's more of that high floor type of tight end. He might not get to that upper echelon of tight ends in the NFL, but he's for sure going to be a nice solid tight end that a lot of teams are going to want to have. He's just solidly built. He's a blocker. He's more of that inline tight end, which is a bit of a rarity in this class, as you're going to find out. He's just got a high motor. He just gives it his all every play. Now, if we're being realistic, though, he might not ever be that number 1 tight end on a team. He might be that number 2 tight end who's great at blocking, can be a red zone threat, but won't have much production throughout the season. Just because he's not that athletic, his speed's not that great, he's not very elusive. But I could see him being just a solid number 2 tight end, which is valuable on a team. He doesn't have much experience at the position because he also played on the defensive line in his earlier days at Ohio State. So he transitioned to tight end. So he hasn't had much experience at the tight end position, but I just don't see how much better he's going to get just because of his athletic limitations. Alright, coming in at number 5, we have Benjamin Yurosek, the tight end from Stanford. Now he's also a bit of a bigger tight end, standing at 6'4", 242 pounds, but I don't see him being that full-time inline blocker like I do with Cade Stover. In 2022, he had 49 receptions for 445 yards and 1 touchdown, which is a bit of a down year. I was scouting him a year prior, last summer, because I thought he might come out in this past year's draft, and I expected a much bigger year from him production-wise, but him and Tanner McKee, they just had a bit of a down year. But in general, Benjamin Yurosek is a very good athlete, especially for his size. He kind of plays the position like a receiver, especially when you look at his ball skills. He can go up and attack the catch point at a pretty high level. He's very fluid in his routes. He runs a pretty nice route tree, and he gives good effort when he blocks. Now, the technique, on the other hand, isn't that great, but he does give good effort. I just don't think he has the frame or the weight to really be a great blocker. I also have production as one of his cons. Although it wasn't a terrible year, I expect a little bit more from Benjamin Yurosek, and I expect next season to be a bit better in the production category. And then also as another con, I have just after the catch, he's not great. He's more of that just catch the ball, turn, and run until you get tackled type of guy. He's not going to do much as in making people miss, which isn't a bad thing. That's how a lot of tight ends are, but it would be nice to see him do a little bit after the catch, just because he's such a good athlete. I mean, Stanford gives him end arounds, and there's only 2 tight ends in college football that get end arounds, and that's Benjamin Yurosek and Brock Bowers, who we'll get to later. But all in all, I think Benjamin Yurosek has the potential to be a bit better than number 5, but he can also kind of just whittle out and kind of drop in the ranks throughout the year. So I think this year is a very pivotal year for Benjamin Yurosek, and in that Stanford offense, I don't really know how that's going to shake out, but I guess we'll see. Alright, coming in at number 4, we have Brevyn Spann-Ford, the tight end from Minnesota. And we were talking about smaller tight ends earlier. This guy is absolutely massive. Standing at 6'7", 270 pounds, this dude is a mountain of a man. And in 2022, he had 42 receptions for 497 yards and 2 touchdowns, which isn't terrible production, but it's not great either. Now, Minnesota definitely uses him as that inline blocking tight end, and I think that's what he's going to be in the NFL as well. He's just super solidly built. His blocking technique is pretty nice. He's able to move guys off the line of scrimmage with ease. I mean, you should be able to at 270. But as far as his receiving upside goes, I think it could get better, but I don't see it ever being a strength of his. I think he's always going to be that number 2 tight end on a team that's an amazing blocker, an amazing special teams player, and can get you some touchdowns in the red zone with that massive frame at 6'7". But he takes a while to get to his top speed, and his top speed isn't all that great anyways. And he's also going to be pretty old. I believe he's a 5th or 6th year senior, so when he gets to the NFL, he's going to be a pretty old prospect. And usually when you see pretty old prospects get to the league, their game never really changes or gets better. They're kind of like what you see is what you get. And with Brevyn Spann-Ford, he's a blocking tight end. He's going to be in line, moving people off the line of scrimmage. He's going to be great for a run-heavy team. But I don't ever see him being that number 1 tight end just because of his receiving capabilities. Alright, at number 3, I do have Oronde Gadsden, the tight end / receiver. He plays more of that tight end position in college, but I do think he's going to have to be more of that receiver in the NFL because he is 6'5", 216 pounds, which is pretty small for the tight end position, at least weight-wise. That's pretty light. You like to see him at least gain 20 pounds just to be a respectable tight end. But in 2022, he had really good production. He had 61 receptions for almost 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. So the production is definitely there. Syracuse loved to target him. And as some of the pros, I have that he's a really good athlete, which he should be at that 216-pound mark, but he runs routes really crisply. He looks pretty comfortable running his routes. He's a natural hands catcher, which I love. He doesn't really let that ball hit his body. He goes up and snags it out of the air. He uses his height to his advantage really nicely. And after the catch, he can make some things happen with his feet, whether that's with juke, spins, or whatever. He's not that typical get the ball in your hands and just sprint upfield until you get tackled. He will kind of make things happen on his own, which I like to see. Now, for his cons, especially if we're grading him as a tight end, his weight is definitely a problem. His blocking isn't great, especially since he's 216 pounds. So he's not going to be that inline type of player. If anything, he's going to be that big slot player. And also his physicality, usually when people are a bit smaller at their position, they make up for it with physicality and effort. And I just didn't really see that with Oronde Gadsden. You can tell he was focused more on his receiving game than his blocking, which might be another sign that he's just a big receiver in the NFL, and that's about it. But even if he is a receiver, he's going to be a dang good one. Alright, coming in at number 2, we have Ja'Tavion Sanders, aka JT Sanders, which is the tight end from Texas, and he's pretty solidly built at 6'4", 243 pounds. And in 2022, he had 54 receptions for 613 yards and 5 touchdowns. So pretty good production, not great, but also not bad at the same time. And as some of his pros have that he's a good athlete, his release off the line of scrimmage and the way he runs his routes is pretty crisp. And when he goes up for the catch, he's able to contort his body in a pretty good way, which is rare for tight ends. He's got really good body control. And I also have that he has pretty good blocking potential. He shows effort, should I say. So I do think eventually with some coaching, he can be an inline tight end. Maybe not full time, but he can definitely go in line if a team needs him to. As some of his cons, it surprised me. He kind of didn't have the best contact balance. I feel like as soon as he got hit, he just fell to the ground. He didn't really have that contact balance that you like to see, especially at 6'4", 243. And also his acceleration isn't great. He's a good athlete, but I feel like it takes him a decent amount of time to get to that top speed or get to that point where he can show off his athleticism. But all in all, I think Ja'Tavion Sanders is going to have a decent year there at Texas with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. Now, he does have a bit of competition when it comes to receiving production, since they got A.D. Mitchell, who was a transfer from Georgia, and they also have Xavier Worthy there. They also have a few more receivers there as well. So production might be hard to come by, but I think if he gets good enough production, he could be a potential back end of the first round type of guy, but I would probably like him more in the early day 2 area. And coming in at number 1, we have everyone's number 1 tight end, Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. Now, he's on the bit of the smaller side at 6'4", 230, but that doesn't affect him really at all. So in 2022, he put up 63 receptions for 942 yards and 7 touchdowns, which is pretty good for a tight end. Now, he's definitely the best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts. I think he's going to succeed Kyle Pitts after this season, and he's going to be known as one of the best tight end prospects we've probably ever seen. He's just super athletic. When he runs his routes, he just gets so much separation due to his athletic ability. He can outrun linebackers. He can out-athletic linebackers. And he's also too big for corners and defensive backs. So he's in that perfect mold for a receiving tight end / big slot player. And it just shows you how good his athleticism is when Georgia literally gives him end arounds as a tight end and he can take it 50 yards for a touchdown. Like, he runs like a receiver. He can actually block somewhat good for his size. Now, I do have it as one of his cons, but I mean, he can hold his own. He might be more of like that Travis Kelce blocking type, at least, where you don't talk about Travis Kelce's blocking, but he can get the job done if you really need him to. And I think that could be Brock Bowers as well. I also have that his size is a bit of a concern. I mean, 6'4", 230, you'd like to see him add at least 5 to 10 pounds of weight to that 230 frame, and I think he's got the frame to do so. So I would like to see that. come draft time. But other than that, he's far and away the best tight end in this class, and the far and away the best tight end probably in the past 5 tight end classes. I could definitely see him going around the top 10 pick, probably even top 5 if there's a team that fits him perfectly, because he's more than just a tight end. He's like an offensive weapon. So I could easily see him going top 5. I have him probably closer to the top 3 on my big board as of right now. He's definitely going to be top 5 by the start of the new college football season. So yeah, with that being said, these are my top tight ends from the class that I've gotten to study so far. As the season goes on, of course, there's going to be more tight ends added to the list. So far, we've only got 8. But let me know if you guys agree with my rankings. And if you like the video, think about giving it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribing if you want to see more of my content. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.